volunteer council.
The September 26th, 2017 meeting of the City of Lawrence Redevelopment Commission, is called to order. The chair has determined the quorum is present. Mr. Hicks, Mr. Kimmerly, Mr. Sullivan, and Mr. Freege, non-voting member. Mr. Marion will be absent for this meeting. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the August 29, 2017 meeting. The commissioners have reviewed the minutes. Are there any questions concerning the minutes? Hearing none. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Sullivan, Commissioner Sullivan, and second by Brian. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. The next item on the agenda is the approval of claims. Do we have any to be approved?
No claims to approve today.
Okay, thank you, Cam. Then we're moving right along to Mr. Starnes and his report from the front, if you will.
Thank you. First, Franklin Road project by way of update in terms of progress. The preliminary engineering scope of work that Hanson Engineering Services is performing, that again is funded by the commission, is 80 to 85% complete. We've transitioned to doing right-of-way analysis. There are 13 parcels of which we will need to acquire certain amounts of right-of-way to facilitate the project. So that's the phase we're in now, and things are very much on track. And of course, once we hit that 100%, that would be the end of the contracted scope of work with Hanson that the commission is funding, and therefore the end of the funding obligation that we have. So it's moving along well. We anticipate having some meetings with a few of the landowners through there about potential contribution of right-of-way or how we might make that work, given that the project does benefit, I think, several of the landowners through there substantially. So that's going well to date, and everything's on track. On the trades district, our development plan that we've put together, there's been some good interest. I think that plan, part of what I've been doing is trying to disseminate that plan to economic development agencies, potential trades users, developers, institutions, et cetera. I can report we've got some good interest from a large mechanical and refrigeration contractor that happened to see the plan, and I don't to this day know how they even got it, but looked me up and said they're interested in moving their headquarters because they're outgrowing their space. It would be a combination office and flex space and a consolidation of a current prefabrication plant that they have in Ohio that would come here. It'd be a substantial addition of jobs to the local market. This company has in total over 250 employees. They work in 40 states. Not all of them are in the office every day, but they do also some advanced things like some in-house engineering and design and things. So it's a good prospect. And again, I think that speaks to the plan making some sense on paper. That's what caused them to call me in the first place. So something that I'll continue to work on. We have a good relationship with the Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce, the Indy Chamber. They have a subsidiary called Develop Indy, which is really a county-wide economic development agency that assists municipalities with right-sizing and negotiating and evaluating potential economic development deals. I'll meet with staff there next Wednesday about this prospect and see what we can make work and see if that's a realistic option. Certainly some things, if so, will come before you all for approval. I would imagine this is a big enough thing that we'll be discussing this, the particulars as they come together with you individually between meetings so that we're all on the same page. You'll note in new business, we've put an authorization to continue negotiations. We'll get into that if there are questions later. It's really just sort of an acknowledgement that there's a prospect, and it helps me to say I've mentioned that to you all in the format of a commission meeting, and feedback in the form of voting to authorize us to continue to negotiate means there's some interest on our part too. I think that's a good thing to demonstrate here, even on the front end. Similarly, on 109.
Before you leave that, say again the number of employees, the potential number of employees that they would bring.
Their current numbers are a little over 250.
Oh, not for the whole company, just for this site.
That's company-wide.
Okay, so for this site, how many, do you know?
No, I don't. The front office part is probably 60 to 75. There would also be prefabrication, which is currently about 20 to 25. And there's a lot of, given the nature of what they do, this would be headquarters, which is important because there's an office component. There's a lot of sort of employees out in the field that are installers and things that don't necessarily come into the office every day, but are, the total is 250 in and out every day. It's probably closer to 100, 125. Those are the kind of details that will be important as we evaluate.
So if I'm getting ahead of
Potential.
myself,
A little bit, only, the size of the company is,
the other thing I'd be interested in is that I'm trying to, tell me how this company, because it sounds ideal, tell me how they're going to fit into the trades district education piece that we've talked about. I don't know exactly what, it's trades education. Are they going to be involved with that here at this site?
I think they do some OJT on-job training as part of their onboarding process. And they are, like most trades operators out there, in continually needing trained workforce. So that's something we're very aligned with them on, and the fit is good given that it is a skilled trades kind of a thing. I don't know that they're not going to be the training piece of this. I think that's probably through an institutional partnership down the road on some site in real estate in the trades district. But beyond that, there is some good support from Employee Indy. I've met with them, and also the Department of Workforce Development to partner with actual employers to do more aggressive job training for prospective employees that I think we would certainly support. So I think that's a separate piece, but I think each company also does some of that themselves, and this would be no different.
What the term I was looking for was if you're an electrician, you go through a period of training before you're actually an electrician, and I don't know if they do that or not. But that's the kind of thing that we talked about for the entire district for the various trades. That's what I was trying to see how that would fit. But it sounds like it might be premature.
Yeah, perhaps a little bit. I think.
And what training they do wouldn't be for their trade, just for, well, it would just be for their company, not for the trade per se.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I've always thought that piece of the plan, the trades district plan, in terms of a training center, would be something that we would. It would be a separate piece that might feed users like this. So it would be a separate organizational structure, perhaps a separate building. I'm not looking to necessarily recruit a user that would do all the training in conjunction with operating a business.
Apprenticeship program, so to speak.
Yeah, I think they do, and most
That's great. Sounds
most
like a
do.
great opportunity.
So the situation is somewhat similar with 10930 East 59th Street. Sorry.
Two questions, or maybe a comment and a question. You mentioned that these people are not currently headquartered in Indianapolis, and you're not quite sure how they learned of this. But it sounds like this is the profile of this company is somebody we'd really love to see relocate here.
Right.
And to the extent that we're not putting material about our plans in the hands of similar companies throughout the Midwest, that might be, we might want to expand our marketing of this to companies that do this kind of work throughout the region. My question is, would your discussions with them focus on them being a possible user of our property there at across from Menards?
Yeah, I'll address the first part. I certainly would like this plan to be in the hands of more operators, and part of how I've gone about marketing it is through statewide organizations like the Indiana Construction Roundtable and the State Subcontractors Association. So it would not surprise me at all if I didn't ask them directly where they got a copy of the plan, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was through one of those channels, because those are both industry-wide organizations that have broad memberships, and they're both, I mean, they're related organizations, but they're both.
I guess what I'm saying is the fact that we've gotten this nibble almost by accident.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is it's really not by accident. I've been trying to get it out there through this through these organizations, and I think it's working, is what I'm saying on that score. So certainly any opportunity I have to send it to others or to individual users as I know of them, I'll be taking that, because I think it could lead to positive things. They do know that I think they're looking at that area in general. They are aware that we own a site across from Menards, and they have a development partner that they've engaged on their side that I think is starting to look at site planning options and architecture. So I think we'll sooner rather than later we'll be into that kind of a discussion, just not quite yet.
Can I ask you a question?
Similarly, then on East 59th Street, that is the property at 59th and Sunnyside that we previously funded a part of a geotechnical survey for, knowing that there was some interest. That company that was interested continues to be interested. They've now retained a firm to represent them in terms of economic development that's helping them with site selection, and I think that site in Lawrence is in their final three for consideration, and that's another opportunity that we'll look at. It would be a new light manufacturing facility. It's a plastics company that does its own in-house design and fabrication and does sort of somewhat specialized custom plastic moldings, et cetera. They've outgrown their current space, which is in Indianapolis, and are looking to essentially double in size. It would be a 100,000 square foot facility or so, and about between construction and equipment over a period of 3 to 5 years, about a $10.5 million investment. That parcel is in our TIF district. So because it's an opportunity, so that's good. And it's currently a company that employs about 80 to 85, but they're growing at 5+% per year and adding employees as they do so. So there's some job growth potential there. It's another deal I'll evaluate with the Indy Chamber that has some good expertise in terms of what state level tools are there, what county level tools are there, how this might score in terms of net impact for employment with median wages and property tax growth, et cetera. So more to come on that one, but similarly, if there are questions, we can certainly discuss it. I'll ask that we take a vote at the end to say we support moving forward and trying to land this there because we feel like that's a good fit. That site is zoned industrial as it is. We feel like it's well screened. This current operation in Indianapolis is next door to a neighborhood. I think it's a nice neighbor in that regard with normal business hours and not a loud or smoky or smelly operation that would be hard to live with in the city. So that I think that lends to something to support given the job growth potential and the investment. Any questions on that one? Both potential good news, certainly early stages, but I was excited to tell you all that there's some movement there that we can consider down the road. Moving on then, the Franklin Road Marsh property we've talked about on a few occasions. I filled in for Mayor Collier at the MyBor Sell Your Cities event, which is an annual thing that they do in Carmel where you address a crowd of realtors on behalf of your city, et cetera. And it's fun, if you want to call it that. But it did give me the occasion to run into the realtor that's listing that property. And so I had a good discussion with her and then actually followed up by phone and talked to her just today. She told me that the interest in that property has by and large been warehousing or industrial or storage. One person looking around it wanted to store boats. Several have wanted to park trucks. There has been one potential grocery operator that was interested. She said that interest has cooled a little bit, but in her words, she thinks we could potentially fire that back up. If we could show them, if that's a use that we would like, we'd show them support in the form of a letter, perhaps, that I could author that would say, the Redevelopment Commission is aware that that property is on the market. We would very much support this for the benefit of area residents. And this might be a grocery operator, specifically a grocery operator that would offer fresh fruits and vegetables because of food access issues there and in a walkable location, given that there are folks in that area that we know that have mobility challenges, et cetera. That's a letter I'm happy to write. I talked to her literally today, and she mentioned that today. So it's not on new business, but I might ask that we similarly do a sort of an informal vote authorization to have me write that letter representing the sense of the commission that we'd like to see that happen. If she's successful in kind of rekindling some interest there, she thought, if there's anything we can offer in terms of financial incentive to get a grocery operator to occupy that building, it would be helpful. I can certainly see how that would be the case. I think using public resources to attract or subsidize retail is always kind of risky. It's a very volatile segment of the market. It's hard to guarantee that somebody will stay in business and that investment will pencil out, so to speak. But given there has been certainly some interest in what would happen to that property, and especially I think given that there has been a majority of the interest has been for uses that would not necessarily have as positive an impact on the community, it's something that we might consider. I'm not going to ask that we authorize an amount necessarily, just to keep that in mind. That again, coming from the realtor, that would help her market the property to grocery operators. I will say she was clear that this would be a larger sort of a full service grocer, but a Hispanic grocer specifically, owned by a family that has, I think she said, others in the area. The demographics seem to make a lot of sense to them. I don't know the name. She wouldn't tell me. I think that would be very positive. It certainly does seem like the demographics would support that. And personally, I have pleasant experiences shopping in a lot of supermercados and carnicerias, et cetera. So that's not a drawback, but I wanted to be, in my view, but to be clear, that is what we're talking about here, just so you know. Yeah, Bruce.
I don't remember, is that piece of property in the TIF district?
I believe it is.
Okay.
Yes. I believe it
I
is.
think showing some level of support for that type of operation would be good. And
If I could comment, this may or may not be related, but we lived in Irvington for 30 years before moving to Lawrence. We had a Hispanic grocer located on Washington Street. And initially, the neighborhood was, or the side of Irvington, one side of Irvington was kind of skeptical about the whole thing because we had no experience with that kind of a grocer. I would tell you that it worked out great. They were, and still are, an asset to the community. And I've told Cam this in the past, he had great takeout. I mean, it was the real deal. And he's done, I come to find out that he's shopped Spanish grocers, basically the same thing. So it's a growing part of Lawrence. And I think it could be an advantage. And if we can get the type of grocer that you're describing, that particular name you mentioned, or the type that is located on Washington Street in Irvington, we would really benefit from it, I believe.
Yeah, it's a big enough space to attract a more full-scale version of a Hispanic grocer, which if we're choosing between that and parking trucks, I think that's an easy call.
Mr. President, I'd make a motion that we ask staff to prepare a letter from our commission to this realtor, expressing our interest in seeing that property develop in that way. I take what Cam says about retail being risky, but I think food is a special category of retail, and there's an awful lot of sensitivity to the issue of food deserts these days, and that as strange as it may sound, you've got to go some distance now from that area to get fresh fruits and vegetables. And I might also, Cam, ask if you might be willing to provide me individually with the name and address of this realtor, as I have a colleague who has a position of at our law school of some consequence, but who doesn't drive and who lives in the neighborhood up behind there, and a very nice house, but his life has been badly disrupted by this, and I think he might individually like to write to this retailer, and maybe that kind of a message from a potential customer might be of probably not the same impact as a letter from our commission, but would show that this isn't just a bunch of government types. This is a grassroots need.
Sure.
So
I might write such a letter myself.
Great. I mean, I think you would all be.
I've heard for a moment. So I've heard the judge make Commissioner Sullivan make a motion.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Cam, please write the letter.
I will do so. Thank you. And the feedback I received was that anything that we're able to provide in writing helps. So I think any letters from commissioners or from neighbors that you all happen to know would only be positive. And
if I can, should anyone else care to write a letter, why don't you provide, if you would, by email, a copy of the letter that you've submitted, and then we can say, for the benefit of our neighbors, this letter has been forwarded in hopes that we might be able to attract such a grocery store.
certainly will.
Does
Yeah.
that sound?
Thanks, Cam.
Yep. Thank you.
Cam, I guess I'd like to follow up with
Brian.
at least preliminary, and maybe way premature, but to at least start thinking about some ways to incentivize it that we can be involved with to make that more attractive. Build out costs, whatever it is that we can do as a commission, and not overstep our bounds. But I realize the build out costs and all the upfront costs of bringing in a grocery is significant, especially if Marsh stripped it, which I think they mostly did. So whatever we can do, again, legally, without overstepping our bounds to incentivize, I think we ought to be brainstorming that so that we're prepared
And I would agree, and I think so too. I'll be discussing with our council what the strictures are. There's certainly some rules from the state level on how we can use our TIF proceeds to benefit private enterprise. So we'll need to be sure we're careful there. But I'd like to put together kind of almost a grant program that we could fund.
And if, the other part that I'm not clear on, but that's an excellent point, Brian. If you could, while you're doing that, draw the line for us between what redevelopment should be doing and what economic development should be doing for the city. Because you've got kind of two sides of that.
Yeah, clarify that for me if you would.
Well, redevelopment, Redevelopment Commission is we are redeveloping, if you will, areas of the city, improving it in several different ways. Economic development is, I guess, a larger kind of an approach to this, which is one of the, when you're going site-specific to a specific store, I don't understand if you're building a redevelopment, let's say that, to use a gross example, a factory that produces, a light industrial factory that produces plastics and employs people, and they actually produce a product. That's a lot different than a retail venture, okay? Economic development at the same time, you're building communities. You can build the infrastructure within the community to include the retail stores that would serve them. And I guess that's a distinction. I ask you to help me draw the lines there. I'm not sure that
Jerry, I would think
Dealt with that.
redeveloping a very tired strip mall would be right in our bailiwick, wouldn't it?
Do you?
I mean,
Okay.
We're not building a brand-new community or building a brand-new neighborhood.
No, we're not.
We're redoing a very tired strip mall that needs a solid tenant.
Well, and that's, I guess, that's my point. When we say it's risky, and is this something that, from a redevelopment standpoint, that we should be doing? That's exactly my point. Maybe this is exactly what we should be doing. If that's true.
In my opinion, it's exactly what we should be
Yeah.
doing. But
And if that's the case, okay,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's certainly well within the bounds of what a redevelopment commission is and does, especially given that the property I do believe is in our redevelopment area for a reason. And another point of context, this is a corridor, Franklin Road, zoomed out a little bit, that we would hope to see to revitalize over time. The road project is part of getting that started. We'll have bike lanes, and it'll be there will be traffic calming measures and things that make transportation through there more positive. I think to area businesses, I think that's a help. Certainly, things like this as well, in the context of looking at it as a corridor, are important. So I don't mean to say I don't disagree at all that this might be a good exception to not wanting to put money toward retail uses, especially given that she said, there's for the one grocery operator she's heard from 5 or 6 uses that would not nearly be as positive, I think, in the eyes of a redevelopment commission with a corridor to revitalize. So I'll say it that way. Yes, sorry, Commissioner Sullivan.
Just to follow up on this, and maybe implicit in what you said was that you're going to do this, but I think one of the things you want to put in this letter is that the city of Lawrence is about to put several $1 million into the street in front of this.
Yes.
And that somebody looking at that property now might be saying, geez, I don't want to locate on this street, and be totally unaware that within 3 years that street's going to be completely different. So saying that the city's about to invest whatever it is, $2-3 million worth in the infrastructure in front of this property, it seems to me would be something to be sure to include, as well as what you were saying about bike paths and everything else. That this would be an exciting place to be. Ought to be part of that letter.
Yes, I would agree, and I do plan to put that in the letter.
looping it, you could even loop it all the way back to the trades district.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So good. Thank you. I appreciate your feedback. It was good to, I think, the realtor and I had traded phone messages for a few weeks there. She came up to the table at the MIBOR event. It was a good conversation, and we'll see where that leads. And lastly, in terms of staff report, just to mention that there were the appraisals on the old sheriff's garage on Shadeland did get to my desk just recently, in the last couple of days. It's my understanding that that's deliberative material for the commission. I'll need to check with council about how we disseminate that to you all so that we can maintain that sort of deliberative kind of privilege. But we did get some appraisals, which will be the backbone of then a request for proposals to then dispose of that site for redevelopment, another corridor that I think we'd like to see some positive new investment in. So it's a good opportunity for that. Then, as far as I'm concerned, we can certainly move on to new business, just really hitting those two kind of votes of support that we negotiate with.
Just two things, Cam?
Yes.
And you could just say no if you care to. Record Street project, specific to Record Street. Anything new there?
No. We are moving forward to prepare the project for a federal grant application.
Okay, so that's, okay, so really nothing.
Which, yeah, I think we had talked about before. This
We
is
did.
why I say
Fort
new, but-
Harrison redevelopment, FHRA projects, anything new?
No, I don't believe so. I think we talked last time about David Weekley building townhomes on Parcel G. I think there's some good interest so far from office tenants on Parcel J down by 56th Street. They could support, and actually a small boutique hotel there, which would support getting phase one of that off the ground, hopefully fairly soon. Apart from that, since last month,
Did David Wheatley actually acquire additional property at this point to build homes?
they have agreed to do so.
Okay,
Be the parcel across the street across Wheeler Road,
right.
from where phase two stops, across from Triton, kind of around St. Mary's Child Care there behind Ivy Tech.
Great, thank you.
It's a townhome product, detached townhomes. So I think they have some of those in the Saxony development in Fishers. It's pretty sharp. Yeah, should look good.
All right, very good. Next on the agenda is new business. Cam?
Yeah, I apologize. Hit the microphone with my pencil. Let's set that down. These are, again, just two sort of authorizations to proceed that we mentioned earlier during the staff report. If there's some consensus or if there's discussion that needs to be had about whether we take some affirmative next steps to really try to firm up the interest from a couple of users on a couple of different sites that we think would be positive. That would be just kind of an initial, we like this prospect, we're going to chase it, and I will take that then to the users on both sides of that and say, we talked about this as a commission. I think we feel good about moving forward and seeing how this could benefit both of us. That's really kind of how it will come into play, just to be clear. Any other questions on that kind of thing?
The only thing you said earlier that their interest might be in our property there across from Menards, and my sense in the, I guess, almost 2 years I've been sitting here now is that we've been pretty jealously guarding that property for the highest and the best use, and this might be it, but it might not be. And I just want to say only for myself that in approving this authorization to go forward, which I plan to do so, it's not without reserving the right to ask that question if it comes to that.
That's entirely fair. Yes. And I think we would all be asking that question. I think there may be some interest in that parcel. It's good. It's well visible. It's a good location. That to me means we care quite a bit about what it looks like and how it lays out on the site. And I think the user itself is working with Browning Investments, a large-scale local developer that's a good sort of competent partner. They're already, I think, spending some initial money on some on some engineering to look at sites in that area, potentially some architecture to be able to show us, here's what we think this building could look like, so that we could give them some feedback on what we think. And certainly if this is something that we're to invest in through some measure of incentives, we have that leverage to say, we need this to look a certain way, we need this to treat the street a certain way, lay out a certain way, all of those things will come, yeah.
With that thought in mind, Commissioner Sullivan, could you frame a motion for us? Not just on that, but actually, you could probably do one motion to cover both these
Can I
engagements.
ask one more question before we?
You absolutely can.
How's the diversity look on this company?
Could you repeat your question?
How's the diversity look on this company that's showing interest? I hate to even go there. It's been a week of President Trump making some comments that have
Right.
seemed to divide the nation sports-wise, but I'd like to know.
Yeah, I don't know right now. There's some interest. I know their size. What that mix looks like, I don't know. I also have to be a little bit careful in terms of how much I can ask and when. But we'll certainly want to know that, along with things like how do the median wages break down? What's the racial makeup? Certainly. I think also important just to point out that these particular prospects would be of interest to us not only because they're new investments in Lawrence, but because they're growing. So I think part of our role as the Redevelopment Commission and as staff here is to seek to build some pathways to have those future positions that will be created filled by Lawrence residents, and we know we have a good diverse community, and so that's something that we see as a strength and part of the work that we'll need to do to make sure those connections are made.
So it's just part of the framing of the projects. Just, there's a lot we don't know. Good question.
Mr. President, I would move that the Lawrence, it is the sense of the Lawrence Redevelopment Commission that our staff should, that we have, let me start again. The Lawrence Redevelopment Commission has received a report of staff of a prospect interested in locating in what we have been referring to as the Trades District area, and that we've received this as highly positive news, and instruct and authorize the staff to commence negotiations with this prospect in the hopes that it would result in a mutually satisfactory development opportunity. Something like that?
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Sounds good to me.
Second.
Bruce?
No, second.
Second. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you.
And then as to the second, I'd say something like the commission has received a report of staff on the progress on the 10930 East 59th Street property with which the commission has previously been involved with respect to environmental remediation and then pretty much the rest of it a carbon copy of the former, that
Right.
we've received the news of an interest in the prospect as a highly positive development, and instruct and authorize the staff to commence negotiations with this prospects in the hope of reaching a mutually satisfactory development opportunity.
Look
And
forward to,
whichever,
Well, and-
whichever one of those sounded better, use that
and
line.
then tag on some words at the end of it, if you could. And look forward to reviewing the outcome of those negotiations.
The only thing I want to clarify on that, were we involved in remediation or the study, the geo study?
It was geotechnical evaluation.
Okay.
Fix.
Certainly has been environmental work as well. We've not funded that.
Good with the motions?
We didn't pay for that, did we?
No.
No.
Are you nodding yes?
Yes.
Good.
Is that as clear as mud?
Yeah.
Clear as a broken
Joe's a
window?
good
We'll make sure it is in the minute. We have a good sense of
I
what
have
we're
a second on
trying
the
to say.
59th Street motion.
Second.
I have show of hands, all in favor. Thank you, gentlemen. Unanimous again, okay? Last item on the agenda is just a reminder that our next meeting is October the 24th, 2017 at 4 PM. Any other business to, you've been sitting there so quietly. Expressionless, the entire meeting. Do you have anything for us this week? This month, I should say.
There is one thing that I'll remind the commission of, if I can have
Could you step forward?
Sure.
60 seconds.
Don't do that to yourself again this month.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Barnett from the Lawrence Community Development Corporation, and I took note of your discussion of potentially providing incentives, and Cam knows where I'm going with this, to commercial property in the redevelopment district. That is expressly anticipated under state law, and to avoid giving commission money to a for-profit entity, you're allowed by law to give it to a nonprofit community development corporation for the improvement of commercial property. So I wanted to specifically say that the Community Development Corporation is able and willing to act in that regard under whatever guidelines you might establish. As you know, we've done that in the past with facade grants. So that is something that we are entirely open to and more than willing to help in any way that we can, should you make the choice to provide any funding for such a program.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Great.
Got it done?
That's good.
Did.
I would anticipate that if we're into the paying for build out costs, TI kind of things, or other kind of relocation or equipment, or in the form of a grant that's through the CDC, similar to the facade grant program, is likely the most expedient way to do that. So, thank you, Chris.
If there's no other business to come
Very
before the
last item.
commission, I would say, oh, Brian.
All right, you made a motion and you had a second on the minutes from August, but we didn't vote on it formally.
Oh,
I
thank you.
agree. I noticed that
All in
after you
favor
did.
of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Thank you.
Well done, Brian.
Hey, I was awake.
Good catch.
I was,
That was a good catch. Yeah.
I was not sleeping as
Thank
people
you.
might think.
Thank you for that. Judge, thank you for crafting our motions
Yes.
this evening. Any other business to come before the commission? If none, do I hear a motion for adjourning?
So moved.
Moved by Bruce, seconded by Ryan. All in favor, show of hands. It's unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you again.
Thank you.